Now, what's often pointed out is that the apocalyptic rhetoric is disempowering. The situation is hopeless. We have to be pessimists. People feel they can do less given that kind of reading of the situation. And so it's very important to give people hope for the purposes of any kind of political action, for it to be transformative. I must confess myself as someone who does engage in apocalyptic rhetoric. And I do this because I'm self-indulgent enough to feel that my role is to try and understand where we're at and try and make sense of it philosophically, rather than to go directly into political action.
I do a lot of work around critical theory and the difference between seeing apocalyptic rhetoric or prophetic rhetoric as something that is a statement of truth, which I think a lot of these conversations tend to see it as a statement of truth. It scares people because it's real, or it irritates them because it's not real, or they can't engage with it because it's real but far off. And I think, especially in critical theory, it's not so much the case of whether it's real or not, but whether it's desirable. So the idea of an apocalypse, an apocalyptic situation, or a utopian situation, that it's not so much for me the question of whether or not people think it's scientifically verifiable and therefore something that motivates them, but whether it's something that's ultimately desirable. And then the question comes in about what is it that motivates people in terms of knowledge? Is it some kind of, do people base their actions on scientifically proven affirmative empirical truth, or do people base their actions on some kind of normative principles, and what is the relationship between these things?
It's absolutely imperative to kind of work out legitimate and approachable ways of communication about climate change, so it's not paralysing for a lot of communities and a lot of people, and how we can effectively engage and even more fundamentally effectively act to tackle climate change.
Some people use only the fear side of the apocalyptic and not the element that is very strong in religious traditions of the fear inspiring hope, or hope balancing the fear, and the hope being the spur to action. So it's not just, ooh, there's nothing we can do about it, but, ooh, this is terrible and I need to do something about it. And beyond that, we need to do something about it. A feeling of community and shared responsibility, not this individualistic emphasis on the I, the isolated I, and the I doesn't upscale very, very easily, but religious communities having the understanding that we're all in it together.
I think underlying this, there's a notion that's dominated really the modern age, that humanity, through science and technology, can control its surrounding environment, the rest of nature, and direct it towards its own ends. And one thing that the apocalyptic rhetoric reminds us of is that we're a part of nature. We're not the masters of nature, and we might not have this final control over the way things are, the way the world goes, both in relation to the external physical environment, but also in relation to our social environment and our economic environment. We're often the subject of economic forces beyond our control.
It's really important to engage with communities of class, race, gender, sexuality, everything, so that we become a broad popular-based movement who's taking the necessary action. And the last thing is that's being spoken about today is what kind of action do we take? Do we take direct action? Do we have a diversity of tactics? What's the purpose and benefits of direct action? And as far as I can see, we have to make it a bigger movement in order to tackle climate change properly.
Apocalyptic rhetoric is talking about this condition, and with the climate change, abrupt climate change would be when we no longer have what's called anthropogenic, human-made climate change, but the climate system takes off in its own rapid changes of its own accord. That's very often what's described, and it is a situation where humans are now part of this much larger process, that we're just along for the ride and have to find our way to fit in with it and cope with it and flourish alongside whatever else is going on.